Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Cutting Through the Bullshit. I am your host, Dr. Stephanie Snyder, and I am a high performance mentor. Through my unique blend of strategy, mindset, and intuition, I help men and women to cut through the BS in order to create the life and business they desire. Per usual, I am excited about today's topic, and if you hear background noise, ignore it. It's fine. Totally okay. My husband is working from home today, so we're kind of sharing spaces here. So, nevertheless, what we're going to talk about today is emotional intelligence. And I love this topic so much, and it's so important as we begin to grow and become our best versions of ourselves, the highest version of ourselves. That's really kind of the purpose of the work that I do, is to get you to a place where you're authentically yourself and your highest self, right? So when it comes to this emotional intelligence, the very first thing that we need to know is when your emotions are high, your intelligence is low. And when your intelligence is high, your emotions are low, right? They just kind of work that way. That's how they go. And so what I like to talk about here is when you think of like those really pivotal scenes in a movie where the emotions seem really high, but they just say the perfect thing. Here's the reason why they say the perfect thing. They have rehearsed that line a million times over, that they're no longer thinking about the line, that the emotions can come out. That doesn't actually happen in our lives. When our emotions increase, we just spew out things, right? Because I guarantee you've had a conversation where you got really heated about something, you were really emotional about something, you don't even know what you said, and then in hindsight you were like, oh, I could have done that better. Oh, I could have said this instead, or oh my goodness, what, right? What did I actually say? Like, what did that person actually say to me that like set me off? Like, what happened here, right? And so this reminds me of a funny situation. I can laugh at it in hindsight. I am very vocal on the soccer field, very vocal on the soccer field. And it's not that and I do not yell at the players, right? Like, I will encourage my kid and I encourage the players. There are times that I yell at the referee. I'll just say it. I own it, right? There are times that I yell at the referee, but I'm always learning, right? Sometimes I do just get annoyed that like the ref isn't calling something, kind of a thing, right? Again, I also know that the referee has a different perspective than I do on the field, just like the coach has a different perspective than I do on the field, just like the players also have a different perspective. I get that. So at the end of the game, I'm not upset about anybody, right? Like it is what it is. But I do get emotional during the game and I'll yell. Well, there have been a few times this past fall season where opposing parents yelled at me. And I've never had that happen before. And it was such an odd experience because I would never engage with an opposing parent ever. One, you don't know what kind of crazy you're dealing with, right? But two, it's like, no, I stay in my lane. And somebody, and I said this to another parent, somebody would have to say something really, really nasty to my kid for me to approach you on the opposing side of the field. And even then, probably not, right? Like, I'm just going to let it go. But it was interesting that in these moments, right, I don't recall what these people said to me, but I didn't spout anything back at them. I stood my ground and I simply said, I'm not engaging with you. I'm not engaging with you. I'm not engaging with you. As they spewed stuff at me. I don't know what they said. I have no idea. It was 1,000% directed at me because there were a couple of times that somebody got in my face, right? But I'm not engaging with you. I'm not engaging with you. I'm not engaging with you. But I made that decision ahead of time, right? Because I know I'm not a parent that's going to engage with other parents. I just don't, right? If you are on the opposing side, the opposing team, we're not going to have a conversation, most likely, right? I will now, at the end of the game, I'll say, hey, your kid played great. I get that. But during the game, we're not talking to each other. because emotions are going to be high, and my guess is that you may not have the same level of emotional intelligence that I do. Not to put myself on a pedestal here, but I, again, I was like, I'm not engaging with you. I'm not engaging with you. I'm not engaging with you. Please walk away. I'm not engaging with you. That is what I said to these parents. And I'm sure it irritated them because they just wanted to have that fight with me and to just go at it. And I just didn't give them the time of day. I was like, I'm not engaging with you. For starters, I wasn't even like, I thought this after the fact. Like, one, I wasn't even speaking to you. I was speaking to the referee, right? Like, it wasn't directed towards you. But nevertheless, 3 times this year, which was just crazy to me because I've never had that happen before. Nevertheless, when it comes to this emotional intelligence, it is so important because we cannot take back the things that we say, right? You can apologize profusely for something that you said, but somebody's always going to remember in the back of their head, this is what you said to them, right? And maybe they don't remember what you said, but they're absolutely going to remember the way that you made them feel. And we don't want to leave people with this kind of icky feeling about us. Not that I'm suggesting that we be people pleasers. That is not where we're at here, right? But you do want to make sure that you are speaking something that's in alignment with you anyways. And that's tough to do when our emotions get really high. So what I do recommend doing, right? And this is something that I practice with my children because let's face it, if you are a parent and your children are being emotional messes, it can be difficult to stay calm, right? When they're having a meltdown, it can be difficult to stay calm. And so the work that I do and with my clients is we talk about who we want to be, right? And so if you don't want to be the yelling, screaming parent, you decide that ahead of time before the situation because you want to respond accordingly, not to react. Reactions are knee jerks that we don't think about. They are automatic. And so if your kid slams a door and you lose your mind, that's a reaction. Now, if a kid slams the door and you're like, you know what, I'm not engaging in this, then you can have the intelligence to say, hey, what's going on? Why are you slamming the door here? And one thing, and this is just a special little caveat here, one thing that I learned to do, now I'm not always great at this, right? But most of the time, the actions and the things that my kids say, I do not take personally. Because I am their mother and I am the safe space, right? So they get to unload all of their emotional messes on me, right? As they get older, we start to talk about like the appropriate ways to do that. But when they're young, they're going to yell and they're scream and they're going to do all of the things because you're going to continue to love them no matter what, right? They know that they're safe to be their full selves. And sometimes that ends up on you, right? Like I remember the first time I realized this, or one of the times that I was cognizant of it, where I was picking up the kids from school, and every time the kids got in the car after school, they would just lose their minds, right? It was like constant fighting for the 20 minutes home. And I started to dread the pickup because that's what it became. And what I realized was my kids were spending so much of their day being well behaved for everybody else, right? Because they wanted to be the good student. They wanted to listen to their teacher. That the second they got in the car, they literally did an emotional sigh where it was like, like now I can release all of the bottled up emotions that I have jammed down all day long. And so what I started to integrate was, one, I made sure my kids had food. Food and water when they got in the car, because sometimes that helps the emotion there, right? And then on like the rough days, we would have a dance party to just move through that stagnant energy, all the stuff that they crammed down. We would just have a dance party, yell and scream and sing at the top of our lungs and wiggle it all out, right? To just get back to a fairly level emotional state, right? And so I did learn those. It was definitely something that I had to learn, quote unquote, the hard way. But that has helped those pickup times drastically. And like just being the example of the calm is helping my kids to begin to communicate other ways, right? So, how do you begin to regulate these emotions? Now, emotions are not good or bad, they just are, right? Being angry is fine, being happy is fine, being like the emotions just are, right? And but you do want to feel them. You don't want to shove them down. And so sometimes there are moments where I don't like I can't express like the tears, like, if I'm in emotional state, maybe I just put on a movie and I just cry out the emotions, or I'll take a hot shower and let the water run and cry in the shower, right? Like crying is a great way to release emotions, and I don't shame that. I don't like I enjoy that. So my kids think it's crazy that I'll put on a sappy love story and just bawl my eyes out one night, but it releases all those pent up emotions, right? And so you do want a way to release them. Whether, it's anger and you go for a run, or you hit a punching bag, or you know, go to a smash room, whatever it is, you do want to be able to release those emotions in a healthy way. You don't want to release them on other people. But the problem is when we don't release them on our own accord, sometimes they come out on other people. And so that's where you'll get, somebody who's stressing out during the holiday season lose their mind on a poor little store clerk, right? Like that's what happens when you don't actually feel your emotions in a healthy way. They come out on other people, and we don't want to do that. And so I can feel myself if I start to lose my patience with people around me, especially with my kids. I know, hey, like time out, go journal, go cry, go do something, yell into a pillow, whatever it is. I've been known to do that as well, to just get the emotion out and not on a person. And so, prime example, and this can be done in a really, really healthy way. So I was having a fairly emotional conversation with my husband a couple weeks ago, and my mother-in-law called in the middle of this conversation, and I didn't have the capacity to have a conversation with my mother-in-law. I was in an emotional state that it wasn't fair. But I answered the phone anyways, and I shouldn't have. I should have just said I would call her back. But I answered the phone anyways, and the very first thing she said just set me off. Not because of her, but because of the state I was already in. And so I handed the phone to my husband and I just walked away. I was like, I just can't. And I walked to another room and I did some breathing exercises, and I just was annoyed by myself, felt the emotion. And a good way to do this, and this is an exercise that I learned, I forget the name of the book, but it's to feel the emotion for a solid 5 minutes. Just that emotion. If you feel that emotion for just 5 minutes, you'll be surprised how quickly it dissipates. You generally don't need the full 5 minutes to just feel that emotion, but then when that emotion is after the 5 minutes, you're like, okay, good, over it, right? This is what I did. I was like, okay, I'm going to feel totally annoyed not because of what my mother-in-law said, but because of the conversation I was having with my husband prior. I'm going to feel totally annoyed, do some breathing, and then come back to life. And so I excused myself, sat in a room by myself. I worked through my own emotion, and then I texted my mother-in-law and I said, I apologize. I was in an emotional conversation with Steve and just didn't have the capacity to joke with you. Can I call you back after the girls go to bed? Yeah, absolutely. And I called her back and I said, again, I apologize. I just didn't have the emotional capacity. She was like, okay, that's fine, right? And she was asking me about Christmas presents, and it was fine. And that's okay to do. Right? It's okay to not answer the phone or respond to a text if you don't have the capacity to do it. It is also okay to not shoot off an email the second that you get it, because here's the thing, that email was probably not written in the same state that you received it in. And you may have misinterpreted it. Same with text messages, right? And so to give yourself kind of that cooling period where you're like, here's, and this is something that I see with soccer coaches a lot, right? Like the coaches for my kids' team, if you're pissed at the way that I coached today, Give me 24 hours and then we'll have a conversation about it, because they know the emotions are high, the intelligence is low, and you're gonna say something in that state that is not going to be what you actually want to say. And that's okay. So you do want to give yourself the space to respond appropriately, not react. And so again, if you want to be a parent who doesn't scream, how do you do that? Well, when you feel your emotions start to bubble, start to percolate, right? Like, we know when we're starting to get annoyed. You know when you're starting to lose your patience. You know when you're about tapped out, right? Like, you can feel it build. And so when you start to feel it build, one, you can excuse yourself from the situation, or you can go, okay, who do I want to be right now in this moment? Right? My girls were arguing about something the other night while I was making dinner, and I really, really, really wanted to lose my mind and just scream at all of them. I just did. That was the state that I was in, that I just wanted to scream at everybody. And they were, I don't even remember what they were arguing about, but they came in, and my 9-year-old was really upset at my 15-year-old. And she was trying to explain something, and the 15-year-old was actually being very calm and intelligent about the conversation, where my 9-year-old was an emotional wreck, and she was just angry, right? And I said, okay, you're allowed to be angry. There's nothing wrong with being angry. Be angry. And when you're done being angry, let's have a conversation with your sister and come up with a win-win situation here. And she sat there and she got emotional and tearful, and I said, okay, are you ready to have a conversation? And she tentatively said yes, but then she couldn't look at her sister. And I said, okay, if you can't look at your sister, it's because you're still upset. So you're fine. Be angry, right? Be upset. That's okay. And then when you're ready, then we'll have a conversation, right? Then you can have a win-win conversation with your sister. And it did take several moments, but ultimately, after she had felt the anger, she and her sister were able to have a win-win conversation, where I think it was over a toy or something, right? Whatever it was. And they were able to have a conversation in regards to that thing where they both won. Right? And that is what I want my kids to know. I want to teach. I don't want to be the referee where I blow the whistle and I throw somebody out of the game, right? Like, that's not how I want to parent. And so if I don't want to parent that way, then I can't show up that way when they're being emotional balls of energy. And so knowing that I don't want to be that yelling, screaming parent, I have to think in advance, how do I want to respond to this situation, right? And this is a constant adjustment. So maybe in one situation, I didn't respond the way that I wanted to because I was feeling overly emotional. And so in the next situation, I can say, okay, I apologize. I handled that wrong. I didn't like the way that I handled it. Next time, here's what I want to do. Right? And it is a constant reevaluation, because as the kids grow and mature, you're going to get different levels of emotion and intelligence, right? And so just knowing in advance, I don't want to be the mom that screams and yells. I don't enjoy that. It's not fun for me, and I know it's not enjoyable for them. And especially in the morning before they go to school, right? I want a calm morning. And so I know that for me to have a calm morning with my kids, I have to have my own quiet time before I go into mom mode. I know this about me, because on the days that I don't have my quiet time, when I don't wake up well ahead of their schedule, I don't have as much patience. And so I know this. And so even on the days that I'm tired, I get up before them, because I want them to have a calm morning before they head out the door to school. It makes it much easier for them to get ready if I'm not yelling and screaming and shouting about how they overslept or whatever it is, right? And so again, because I know the type of parent that I want to be, I can handle and adjust these situations accordingly. And it is going to be a constant thing, because your emotions may come up when you don't expect them to. And then all of a sudden you're taken off guard, from an emotion where you're like, oh, that actually, shoot, that activated me. Why did that activate me? Let me look at this before I react to you. And so when you are starting to develop this level of emotional intelligence, it's important to give yourself a whole lot of grace, because you don't know better until you know better. And so I recommend you don't fuss at yourself. Don't beat yourself up about getting this conversation wrong, right? Because you always have the ability to adapt it and to change it. And you can apologize to your kids. Hey, I'm sorry. I flew off my rocker. I didn't have a whole lot of patience. I'm hungry, or I'm tired, right? Like, my kids know, and I had this conversation with my son the other day, like, my kids know when I'm done in mom mode. Like, 8:30, 9 o'clock, please stop asking me questions. It's not that I don't want to have a conversation with you. I just don't want to be in that masculine energy where I'm planning the next event, right? If you want to have a conversation with me about school or something like that, that's okay. But the whole like, hey mom, can we do this? Can we do that? Can you do this? Can you, like, I've hit my max. I'm just done. You can put that question in tomorrow morning and I will answer it, right? Like, and I'm allowed to do that because it's not fair to my kids to just be rude, or to feel like I'm being rude in that situation. So I say all of these things because emotional intelligence is really important in the workplace, in home life, in all of our situations, right? You want to feel your emotions. And so I'm going to give you just a quick little kind of a checklist here. So if you are working on developing your emotional intelligence, I want you to start with the first scenario that you would like to respond differently to. So whether that's your spouse, whether that's your boss, whether it's your kids, right? Like, pick one relationship that you want to respond differently to first. Okay? And then just observe that relationship for a couple of days. Right? Like, if it's your kids and they, coming home from school, they're emotional messes, right? How can you better prepare yourself to pick them up? Maybe you listen to some meditation music in the car. Maybe you have snacks for everybody. Maybe you do a dance party, right? Like, so first, find a relationship that you want to be more intelligent with, right? And then observe it, okay? And then choose ahead of time how you would prefer to respond. You're probably not going to get it right the first time, or the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time, and that's okay, right? But you want to choose how you want to respond. So instead of yelling at your kid to hurry up and brush their teeth, hey, I have asked you 3 times to brush your teeth. Can you brush your teeth now? I don't want to ask again, right? You can say it without being nasty about it, right? And so, again, find a relationship that you want to work on, observe it, choose how you want to respond, and then continue to adjust. Oh, I didn't respond to that the way that I wanted to. Oh, I didn't respond. I want to change this. I apologize for losing my mind there, like, whatever it is, right? So I hope this helped you. I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day. And if emotional intelligence is something that you're wanting to work on in 2025, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I do have spots available for private mentoring, and those programs are life-changing. I really enjoy that work. It's really, really fun. And so if you do have questions about that, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can always find me on Instagram at stephaniesnyderphd, or head over to my website, stephaniesnyderphd.com. Or you can comment, on this video, or whatever. Like, subscribe. I would love that. My YouTube subscribers are going up, as well as my podcast subscribers, and I love to see that. If this episode did resonate with you and you do want to share it on social, I do appreciate that very, very much. And I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day. And as always, be you, because the world needs more of you. Bye.